everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of First Phosphate, a mineral development company dedicated to producing high-purity phosphate for the LFP battery industry. It's John Passalacqua. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Jesse. Always great to be here.
Well, let's kick things off with a high-level overview of the LFP battery space right now, because this is a space that I believe most investors in the commodities sector are not paying close enough attention to. So from your perspective, what are the main themes and trends that you think investors should be watching in that space?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, this is really the time for LFP battery. It's really the time for phosphate-based batteries on a couple of very important pieces of data. Number one, 70% of all batteries being produced, whether they're for EVs, battery energy storage, data centers, robotics, small appliances, are now LFP batteries. The traditional batteries, nickel, manganese, cobalt, which is still what the West is holding on to, are less than 20% of what's being made in China. And as you know, China leads. So China is leading with the LFP battery for certain reasons, obviously safety, lower cost, and also ability to make a lot of this battery in a very simple way. It simplifies all of the logistics around the EVs, but also other things like energy storage. So that's a very important factor, and also the fact that now we're talking about onshoring into North America, and all of that requires batteries to basically regulate power, energy, robotics, automation of all forms. So LFP battery is the future here.
Yeah, and give us some more insights there when it comes to the robotics side of things. I have to pull on that thread because robotics is an area that seems to be making more and more progress. A lot of that we are seeing out of China, and people are starting to pay attention. How do LFP battery materials play a role in the robotics industry?
Yeah, so let's talk about something very simple. So, for instance, NVIDIA's latest announcement that they want to bring one of their big factories back to the U.S., I believe in Arizona. I mean, that's going to be state of the art. I mean, you cannot manufacture in the same way that you do outside of North America with a lot of humans. When you come to North America, it involves a lot of automation, and a factory floor of that type is going to be fully automated with robotics. And in order for the robotics and the automation to move around, first of all the energy, all the current going through the facility needs to be regulated, and it needs to be stored. And all of that is regulated and stored on LFP battery, but also the smaller precision devices within the factory, the robotics, all of that is on LFP battery.
I want to talk about the trade war developing between the US and China, which shows no signs of stopping at the moment. Considering how heavily the LFP battery supply chain is concentrated in China, how do you expect this to impact things? And obviously, this highlights the importance of domestic phosphate production from companies like First Phosphate.
Yeah, so very good question, Jesse. So even before Trump came to power, when Biden was chipping back and forth with China around computer chips, and stopping supplies to China, and China was pushing back with rare earths. They were also pushing back with, they came out with something called, hey, LFP technology. We're going to stop any export of LFP technology to the West. And most people in the West went, what the hell is that? So they recognize LFP technology to make LFP battery, lithium iron phosphate battery, as a strategic asset to the country because they control it all. And through that, they basically control all the battery energy storage in the world. So any battery energy storage that you have in North America right now comes from China. The cells come from China, and they're all LFP battery cells. So China really sees that as a very strategic advantage, the fact that they have all of the world's LFP battery. Now, obviously, there's a lot of initiatives. First Phosphate is one of them, where we have technology to make lithium iron phosphate batteries, battery powder in North America. There are also companies that know to make the cells. All that's starting up, and that's going to require a lot of phosphate. But when you start looking at phosphate in North America, well, we have fertilizer grade phosphate, and even that we don't even have enough of, even if you wanted to put in the battery, but you can't. You need high purity phosphate. You need purified phosphoric acid. And what we have in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, is this really pure volcanic igneous rock, which represents only 1% of the world's phosphate supply. And it's so pure, Jesse, that almost 100% of it turns directly into this purified phosphoric acid that goes into batteries. If you wanted to do that with fertilizer grade phosphate, you would need 10 or 20 times that same amount, and you would need massive amount of fields to spread all of the low grade stuff on top of it just to get a little bit of the high grade stuff. But we get all of the high grade stuff right away. So we are a perfect resource to really maximize the downstream technology play into phosphoric acid that goes into LFP battery. Think of it as the world's purest form of lithium, purest form of anything. We come up with the purest phosphate in the world, and that's been researched through the universities and through our metallurgical studies as well.
Well, you mentioned the purity of that phosphate. I want to read a quote here from Yves-François Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc Québécois party, who said, Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. It is very important. It has to be exploited. So obviously, we're seeing political leadership in Canada turn their attention to phosphate as a critical commodity. Break down your thoughts there.
Yeah, so that quote, by the way, was in the federal electoral debate. I mean, Canada's in the middle of an election, and right during the debate, he was asked about critical minerals, and that the party leader basically came out and said, phosphate in Quebec, we have the purest supply of phosphate in all of North America. We definitely have to make use of this. So there's a very important political recognition now of phosphate within the the battery supply chain, not only within food, but within the battery supply chain for LFP batteries. They already have lithium in Quebec. They need to get the phosphate going as well. There's very few companies in the phosphate business in North America, in Quebec, and there's very few phosphate reserves like ours. Like ours is very special. Our Bégin-Lamarche project has some of the highest grades that's ever been found out there in Quebec, and it's at 70 kilometers, 70 from the deep sea port of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, which has got over 1,200 hectares of open land for industrial processing and all that. We've got space at the port. We're 70 kilometers from the intermodal station. So we're in a really good region to be able to exploit all of this and get it and actually make it happen. We're not sitting at thousands of kilometers from major infrastructure. This is why even in that statement, the politician said, hey, not only do we have the best phosphate in all of North America, but we've got it right near infrastructure. So like, what are we waiting for? So this is really positive now. Once this election is over in Canada, the role of phosphate is going to be amplified politically.
Well, that's a perfect segue into discussing how First Phosphate is playing a role in all of this. The company has several strategic advantages when it comes to phosphate production and a vertically integrated supply chain. So first, let's talk about the high purity phosphate resource that you have. You've touched on it. Give us some more details.
Yeah, so in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, which is also the home of Rio Tinto with major industrial infrastructure, we've got the phosphate very close to infrastructure. We've already established that. We're in the process of going through a feasibility study to establish the mine, hopefully by 2029, and a very aggressive timeline. But not only that, we've also looked downstream. So we have technology to be able to process that phosphate into what is purified phosphoric acid, and then into iron phosphate, which is the precursor for making lithium iron phosphate, LFP, cathode active material. That is the powder that goes into the batteries. And we're developing that whole supply chain from mine all the way to the production of this cathode active material, which then gets passed over to partners to make LFP battery cells and LFP cells. Once we're able to LFP battery cells and LFP battery packs, once we're able to do that, North America becomes independent. We won't have to rely on China anymore to make massive AI data center storage units on LFP battery energy storage of all types for hydroelectric, solar, wind power, and all kinds of automated devices, robotics, factory automation, small wheelchairs, internal battery energy storage in people's homes, batteries for EVs, whatever it may be. We'll be completely independent. So we're leading that charge, Jesse, right from the battery, right from the mine all the way to the cell. That can make that battery. Obviously, we're not going to do it all on our own. It takes a village to raise this stuff, but we're working on the most critical, important part, and that is the raw materials and transforming them into that that powder, that battery powder that's required to do the rest of the mile.
Yes, First Phosphate has the capability to fully refine the high purity phosphate ore into battery grade material. Walk us through that process.
Yeah, so the process is you mine phosphate concentrate. We purify the phosphate concentrate to a very, very fine phosphate. It's like almost 100% purity. You then take that phosphate concentrate. It is attacked by sulfuric acid. It makes phosphoric acid. The phosphoric acid is then blended with iron powder. So it makes the precursor, which is iron phosphate precursor. And then this iron phosphate precursor is then bound with lithium. So you get LFP cathode active material, which then goes into the battery cells. The battery cells then go into battery packs, and then the battery packs can be used for anything, from energy storage to EVs, to data centers, to small electronic devices, robotics, whatever it may be.
Full vertical integration is one of the main themes of First Phosphate, from mining to phosphate processing to LFP cathode active material production, as you've just laid out. How are you able to achieve this? Because there's companies out there who might just mine or extract the phosphate, but to be able to take it throughout this entire value chain is another issue entirely. Talk to us about that capability that you have.
Yeah, so that credibility starts with us focusing on our strength, which is obviously, having the resource of phosphate in an area where it's accessible, close to port, close to infrastructure, having a high purity source. So we've got all of that, and then obviously, we make no qualms about it, but to move downstream, you need some serious partners. So to move to the next level, which is to make the purified phosphoric acid, we have, the largest producer of phosphoric acid in the world, which is Prayon out of Belgium. We're licensing their technology to make purified phosphoric acid. And we're also, working very closely with them on the whole phosphate supply chain. Then from there, we move into making, iron phosphate. So to make iron phosphate, you then take the purified phosphate, and there we work with GKN Hoganese, which is the world's largest atomizer of steel powder. And they're providing to us their steel powder, which then gets blended with the phosphate to make iron phosphate. And then after that, we're working with one of the first ever producers of LFP cathode active material in North America back in 2000, before the technology was sort of usurped from North America and went to China. That's with Altian Technologies, and they have the process for making lithium iron phosphate. So that's the way you get downstream. You get downstream with the best of the best, the best of breed, and you focus on what you do that's great. And obviously, we're always open to more and evolving partnerships. We don't expect to do it all, but we expect to do it together with the best in the industry.
And your strategic location and infrastructure, something else you've touched on, something very important to actually be able to transport the material that you extract as well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so being at 70 kilometers from port, obviously, it's easy to get the material to port. Being at about 50 kilometers to rail station as well, so we can get the material to rail and to port. Once it's on rail and once it's on port, it can really move anywhere around the world. And we also have, massive amounts of land available at Port Saguenay, just at 70 kilometers from the eventual mine site, to be able to consolidate cargo and to be able to move it onto train or onto boat, to get anywhere across North America and the world. So extreme important logistical advantages for the company.
And you spoke about some partners that you were working with to move this entire project forward. If you could provide some more color there, that would be great. And also, you mentioned that you are open to bringing on new partners. How do you dive into that? Are you speaking with anybody at the moment? Is there anything you can reveal about potential partners you're speaking with? What's your strategy in terms of reaching out and getting some more strategic partners on board?
Yeah, so Jesse, I mean, look, we are a smaller company, but I believe we are a great company, and we only will work with other great companies, whether small, medium, or large companies. At the moment, they seem to be all large around us. So the strategy is there to work with the best of breed that's out there. Now, the other really important thing is these partners bring to us what is commercial technology. So everything around our phosphoric acid plant will be working with technology that's already been in the marketplace for 50 to 70 years. So I'm not a believer at all in all this pilot bench and research and development around the battery industry. I just don't think you'll ever catch up to China with that. So we're working with everything that's already out there. We can immediately go to small scale commercial, and once that's working, we can go to large scale commercial, because we're dealing with technologies that are proven. They're proven on a worldwide basis, and they've been out there for a long time. And that's what the serious partners bring to the table. And that's, I think, the only way that you can get up and catch up and stay on top.
And could you give some details on the team behind First Phosphate? Let's start with yourself and your own background, how you came to join the company, and then any color you could provide on other team members and how you plan to leverage their expertise for the project would be great.
Yeah. Okay. So myself, I come from a financial background. I run my own small family office, and I've always been invested in a lot of companies, and this one I just found so important that I wanted to be the one running it, so that I could make sure that it went well. I've also never seen such a good opportunity ever in my life. I have a deep technology background, and this sort of opportunity brought together everything that I've ever done in my life. International business, technology, and I really saw the ability to go from a mine right through to a technological process and to fuse the whole thing together into one coherent supply chain, which is what we've been talking about for the longest time in the West, that needed to happen. So that's my background. It's kind of a very special kind of interwoven background, which I think you need for something like this. We've got a number of very important team leads. To go through everybody would be difficult at this time. We've got our president, Armand McKenzie, who's been very involved in the iron ore industry in Quebec, and also lots of experience with Indigenous affairs. So he's really, helping to bring forward all of the relationships that are required and all of the deep industry experience. We've got David Dufour, who's our senior vice president. He worked on many projects, especially in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean area of Quebec. He's seen them go well. He's seen other projects go not so well. So he's really got the experience to be able to, protect us and guide us in the right manner. Got a very experienced geologist, Gilles Lavadière, who's worked on these phosphate deposits for over 10, 15 years. We've got Mario Bouchard, who was the ex-deputy minister to the Ministry of the Economy in Quebec, who saw all these large projects be developed in Quebec, and has got his pulse on what you need to do. So again, we just like we do with technology, we do the same thing with people. Great people who are experienced, people who can bring to the table something that's real. It's not experimental. They've done it before. They're going to do it again. It's just a matter of going through the steps professionally and making it happen.
Well, we were talking off camera before we hit record today about the lack of big attention when it comes to phosphate. When people talk about commodities, usually gold and silver is top of mind these days. People talk about uranium here and there, maybe oil and gas, but even then you don't hear a lot when it comes to media, et cetera, in the space. Why do you think people haven't woken up to the potential here and how important phosphate is moving forward, particularly with a company like First Phosphate? Obviously, a great opportunity to enter into this industry before it really takes off. But what are the catalysts that you see potentially causing the generalist out there to wake up and realize the value in phosphate?
Yeah, as you know, Jesse, so our markets tend to be a little bit trendish. We tend to chase trends, right? First we chase lithium, then we chase gold, then we chase silver, and then we chase other commodities. Pretty soon, and the tailwinds are in our favor, for everyone to start chasing high purity phosphate out of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec. And what are those tailwinds? We already mentioned them. LFP technology being banned for export from China, LFP technology being fully in China, the U.S. wanting to onshore. The only way to onshore is through automation, and that automation is based on LFP battery. That's very important. The fact now that data centers of all sorts, nuclear energy, all of these devices are now moving to electricity that needs to be regulated, and it needs to be stored, and there's not enough of it, and so all of that is on LFP battery energy storage, whether it's wind, solar, hydroelectric, nuclear. Everything needs to be stored. So that's another massive trend. You've seen also, you mentioned it earlier, we're now being debated at the highest spheres of Canadian society, of Canadian politics, on phosphate, but high purity phosphate. There's nothing like this anywhere in the world. This is the highest source of phosphate. So people are starting to wake up to it. We've seen, a lot of wake up. If you see the activity on the First Phosphate stock has really woken up here in the last week or two, when all of this onshoring has started to be talked about, the political implications. We just, continue to do our job, and our job is to run a very solid company. And the market will do what it needs to do. But I'm already quite happy with the reception that we've received to our project, to our share price, to everything that we're doing, not only from shareholders, not only from the market, but also from governments across the globe, even as far away as Europe and Asia.
Yeah, I think the China angle is a very fascinating one. The fact that hostilities seem to be continuing between the US administration and China when it comes to trade war, when it comes to the onshoring of resources. And China is a very strategic nation, and they think long term. And this sort of restriction of exports and control of the LFP battery industry is something that I think is going to continue. And I think that will be a major driver for projects like yours. Let's finish on, I'll open the floor to you. Is there anything that we haven't yet discussed? Anything you'd like to emphasize to potential shareholders of First Phosphate?
Yeah, and look, I think the tailwinds are behind us. I think you could almost call it like a tsunami. When a tsunami is approaching, it's not a wave with a high amplitude. It's a very long wave, and it doesn't look like it's able to do a lot of damage. But once this LFP wave, which is just right on our shores, hits, it's going to be massive. We're already starting to see a lot of the companies panic, because now there's a 125% tariff on all these battery energy storage systems coming out of China, fully controlled by China. China's going to play very hard with this LFP technology, might play very hard with this battery energy storage technology. And the time to onshore that here in North America is now. And you have to look at, who's been in this market, who's been slowly, diligently preparing all of this for the past 3 years. There's no one further ahead than First Phosphate. So we're here to now reap the rewards of hard work. That's what I've always believed. You build silently, you keep building during the hard times, and you will have your day. So now it's the time for igneous phosphate in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, Quebec, and also for First Phosphate building the downstream supply chain. All of it wrapped together in one company. You can't find that anywhere. We couldn't be better positioned. So extremely happy with the way things are developing. The tailwinds that we predicted are finally here.
Well, John, I always enjoy conversing with you about the phosphate industry and First Phosphate. You have a ton of knowledge in the sector, and it definitely shows. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the First Phosphate website, as well as social media for people who want to follow the company. Thank you so much for coming on once again.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And anyone can follow us. They can follow us online at www.firstphosphate.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I tend to post a lot on LinkedIn. Anything that's happening in the industry, I'll always give a comment. Try to be very neutral about that. You can follow our stock, PHOS, as FOS on the Canadian Securities Exchange, KD0 on Frankfurt, and FRSPF on the OTCQB in the United States. And please follow also, all of our socials. All of our socials for the company are there.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.